There we go. Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Annabelle Collinson. I am the head of marketing and operations for the INBLF. If you've got an email from the network and it hasn't been from Arnie, it's probably been from me. So I'm in charge of all organizational matters. Thank you all for joining today.
I'll go to Martin.
Hello.
I am Mark Durant.
Other Mark.
By the way, a law school friend of Arnie's. I live midway between New York and Philadelphia and do a lot of litigation in both places. Let me say, I know virtually nothing about this subject area, except that what my firm does, or what we've always done, is mostly two things. We've done an awful lot of securities and financial litigation, and I also am a former federal prosecutor, so we do a lot of white-collar criminal defense. There's a tremendous priority by the SEC and by FINRA, and in the financial community overall for cyber security. And Arnie asked me to join this group, and I am, because I think I might be able to help you all in marketing, since we represent brokerage houses, financial advisors, and I think it's something that can be presented, that we have expertise in the fintech industry, although I would need help with the nitty-gritty of the technical and computer stuff. And by the way, let me just say, while I got the floor, there actually has been, for a pretty long time now, emphasis by the regulators in dealing with the advancing electronic revolution and technical revolution. You know, it started as simply as stockbrokers taking emails in their personal accounts from customers and ending up getting into a lot of trouble with FINRA, because then those communications were not in the records base. So I have experience in the area, but as I've already said, I just know nothing about the bytes and the kilobytes, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, as Mark indicated, I know his expertise will be very significant for this group. Let me turn to Martin.
Thank you. My name is Martin Hemmer. I'm from the Netherlands. I'm working at AKD. It's a full service law firm operating in the Benelux countries, so the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg. I'm actually heading the IP, IT, and data protection group, and as a consequence, regularly involved with ransomware issues. So I think it's interesting to discuss international developments on ransomware, something that has been discussed in the past few months in the Netherlands is an initiative of the government to try to ban paying out ransom requests, at least by insurance companies. But that also has been criticized a lot, because, well, sometimes it's inevitable for a company to continue their work to pay something. So that's something interesting that might be useful to discuss. At least it would be interesting for me to hear if this discussion is also going on in the US or other countries. But very nice meeting you all.
Okay, I'm going to jump to Art Sackler, because when you start mentioning legislation, I mean, one of the things that I really encouraged Art with his background to hop onto this group. Art, go ahead.
Thank you, Arnie. Good morning, everybody. Art Sackler from Sackler, Brinkman and Hughes in DC. Although not currently, I'm at my house in Bethesda, Maryland. But anyway, my focus has been largely on public policy, advocacy, lobbying, all the related Washington, D.C. constellation of how do you get something done through Congress or various agencies. And I've done a lot in the past on digital-driven issues, not specifically yet on cybersecurity, although there seems to be a ton of interest on the Hill without a lot of progress being made yet. And I have a couple of substantive subspecialties, if you will, where we do both transactional and policy issues in postal affairs, in travel and tourism, and others. But it's the overall background, I think, that could help me help this task force, hopefully will. Arnie?
Okay, and I think put a pin in Art's name as far as if you need information about things that are happening on Capitol Hill, you have clients that want to sort of make a stop there or find out things. Art is a go-to person for those kind of services. David Rosenthal.
Yes, hi. I'm new to this group. I was recommended by a colleague of the law firm where I'm a partner with. This is Fisher in Switzerland, so in the heart of Europe. And I have been doing data law and IT law for over 20 years, have a technical and legal background. So I'm actually also into the bits and bytes and kilobytes, as said before. And ransomware, we have about 2 or 3 cases per month of clients that are affected by this. I have a very close relationship also with the police here in Switzerland, and investigation on that side. So that's where we're active in. And apart from that, very active in the whole privacy field, have developed some tools also for the whole big Schrems 2 discussion, which you in the US, or at least the US colleagues, certainly have heard of, and where the European colleagues are certainly suffering of. And our clients of my team are mostly, of course, Swiss and international corporations in the private industry, some of the government, of the Swiss government, and a lot in the financial services industry, where we have been helping them moving to the cloud, overcoming issues like Cloud Act and these kind of things, and banking secrecy and all the stuff, from Switzerland.
That's great, David. Thank you. Farshad.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So glad to be on this call. So I'm an associate with Advire Legal. We're based in Mumbai, India. So we typically have a corporate and M&A litigation practice, and myself, I'm quite new to the data protection privacy thing, but I certainly hope that I can help, given perspective from the laws in India on this as and when I can. And thank you.
And Farshad, I'd like to thank you for being here, because I'm sure it's late at night in Mumbai.
It's fine. I'm really happy to be on this call. Thank you.
Okay, Mark Del Bianco, you're mute.
I was sorry about that. Mark Del Bianco. I am a member of the DC chapter. And I am on here because Arnie suggested that the task force would go well beyond ransomware, which is a good thing, because I have not had any experience with ransomware at all. I don't actually anticipate it, but it's possible. My area of practice is basically telecom and internet. And basically I either work with the builders or operators of telecom networks, or the providers of applications or content that ride those networks. So where my work kind of intersects what we're talking about here is I've done, for example, data breach situations with the FCC, And in fact, the first one about 5 years ago, because everybody thought the FCC didn't have jurisdiction over telecom data breaches. And then I deal, because of the nature of the networks, I'm always dealing with private, both EU, GDPR, and American privacy issues, and advising on that, drafting privacy policies, and advising on how data can be transferred. Also, I get into, in doing commercial arrangements, get into various security requirements that the network operators and owners impose, and the standards that have been developed for networks. I've also had some experience. Joe, do you remember about 10 years ago when I consulted you? I had a client at the time that was monitoring its network. It was a caller ID spoofing / long distance company. They were monitoring their network in conformity with their terms of service, and they discovered lots of fraud going on. So we retained Joe to advise them what they could do about reporting it to the FBI. As it turned out, there wasn't really much, but later on, that company got involved in, or was often used and misused. And so I've had a lot of experience dealing with the national security agencies and state and federal authorities on warrant issues for data on telecom networks. So that's where I'd fit in. And by the way, I guess it was it the other Mark that mentioned lack of technical expertise? I don't have much computer expertise, but I do know an awful lot about how networks work and run, and the types of equipment that's involved, and would be happy to advise anyone that had questions on that.
Superb. Guillaume.
Yes, thank you very much. So I am Guillaume Daly, and I am working for the law firm Molitor Avocat à la Cour, which is a law firm in Luxembourg, so a mid-sized law firm with about 31 lawyers. And we have within the firm a department specialized in IP, IT, and data protection. So I am senior associate in the department, and Virginie Lieberman is heading the department, but she could not make it here. But I am replacing her. So in our practice, we are dealing with general IP matters, but a lot with data protection and assistance of clients with GDPR compliance projects. So in this matter, we are dealing with some cases of data breaches, which of course triggers some formalities and legal things for the client, and we are assisting them with that.
Okay, thank you. Carolyn.
Carolyn Martin, and I'm senior counsel with Arnie at Lutzker and Lutzker. And I've been involved in technology development for about 30 years, not all of it on the legal side, a lot of it on the business side, with content and consumer experiences more than the hardcore technology side. And my interest now is in privacy, particularly as it pertains to K through 12 and college education, and also facial recognition issues. I'm happy to be part of the committee.
Okay, and I'll add, since Carolyn just sort of referenced 30 years, she had been senior counsel with Gannett, which changes Tegna to various things, but in the media, radio, television, newspapers, leader in the internet, and she and I have been colleagues, friends for longer than I'll say. Not quite as long as Mark, but close to it. Ethan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ethan Barr. I'm a new associate with Lutzker and Lutzker, based in Washington, D.C. I've been primarily doing copyright and trademark work, both litigation and transactional, as well as some work on various privacy law issues in my first 5 or so months. I have virtually no experience with ransomware. I do have my tangential experiences, prior experience with working in various charter schools in a bunch of cities in the northeastern United States, primarily as an academic operations manager of a middle school. So a lot of that job was involved with compliance with FERPA and other relevant privacy laws. So I've used some of that knowledge to assist with Lutzker and Lutzker's clients in the education sector, in addition to some work reviewing clients' privacy policies and some right of publicity issues. But again, my knowledge of ransomware issues is pretty limited. So I'm excited to learn more while applying my general privacy law knowledge and experience wherever possible.
And I'll simply add that Ethan is an elegant writer, which is quintessentially essential for any legal services. Bert, introduce yourself.
Good morning, all. My name's Bert Piper, and I'm a law clerk at Lutzker and Lutzker here in Washington, D.C. I'm also a 3L at the George Washington University Law School, be graduating and then joining the Department of Labor as an ALJ law clerk for 2 years. Long-term career goal is to work in cybersecurity.
And Bert has been, as we've been dealing with these issues, Bert has been a phenomenal research resource and analysis. Don't mistake his youth for a lack of depth.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, I will turn this over to Steve and Joe in one moment, but I just want to say I appreciate, as I said, I view this as a start. I think this is a new venture for INBLF, and my plan initially was to pick a topic that cut across lots of disciplines, lots of countries, lots of practices, and see if we can create a task force that can be marketed for services of the members of the task force, the firms of INBLF, to see if we can coordinate, and not just seeing, between the United States, India, Luxembourg, other Switzerland, other countries. I know that there is a broad opportunity here, and Joe, I don't know if he did it strictly in terms of the task force, but sent out an email which I circulated and he circulated. And if you haven't seen it, I said, trying to figure out an agenda for this meeting. Joe's email, which discussed a host of cybersecurity, ransomware, privacy issues, really formed a fabulous foundation for the kinds of things that we may look at, and not the least of which is preparation as of weeks ago, but clearly as of today with additional developments. What will the Russians be doing as part of their effort to sort of deal with Ukraine and all that? And I want to turn it over to Joe and Steve to sort of both introduce themselves, their practices, and then begin a discussion as to, with the resources that we have both on the Zoom now and then in the background with INBLF, how we can sort of better expand our own work, reach out to entities that don't know about us as a group, and use this group resource as a way of expanding our own practices. So Joe and Steve, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. So thank you, Arnie. Really appreciate it. Do you want to go first, Steve, or should I go? It's up to you.
Go ahead, Joe.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So first, obviously, let me just start by thanking Arnie for convening the group when he spoke about it to Steve and I a couple of months ago as an idea that he wanted to bring to the board. It was just so obvious before he got the words out of his mouth for the first sentence. I think I said that's a brilliant idea because, at least in my practice, I've been dealing with these issues for quite some time, and they do cut across jurisdictional bounds. So for those of you that don't know me, I have a small boutique firm in New York. The full-time focus of our firm is the law of data privacy and security and cybercrime prevention and response. And we're 6 lawyers, and we've been doing that since 2007. Before that, I ran the cybercrime unit at the Department of Justice in New York where for 10 years, from 1997 to 2007, I chased hackers, IP thieves, et cetera. And so really, ransomware is maybe new to the legal profession as a major issue, but it's something I was dealing with literally in 1999. I think was my first ransomware case of one form or another. And they were, a feature and a staple of my practice as a criminal prosecutor. And then really from when we started the firm to today, it's been a steady stream of work that we've been doing. It's obviously in the last few years ramped up significantly. I can tell you I've had ransomware clients, ransomware victims as clients from all sectors of industry and the economy, including law firms, which have been the victims of ransomware, and those are particularly challenging and difficult situations. Over the years, there have been a lot of legal developments in the area in the United States. And I think, one thing that this group can do is share knowledge on those issues, because ultimately what my hope is for the group is not only that we just meet terrific people who practice in our space, which of course is always a goal of the INBLF, but also that we're resources for each other, not only when a client calls with an emergency, but also with respect to proactive ways in which we can get in front of clients before an emergency happens. Because as I'm sure all of you know who've dealt with ransomware situations, it's enormously easier to deal with those situations if the client is prepared than if they're not prepared. So, I'll just kind of leave it at that at the high level. Look forward to working with Arnie and Steve and everyone on this. Again, it's been my experience that where there's a ransomware issue, it's almost never the case that the victim, the threat actor, and the money flows all stay within a country. That is, I've worked hundreds of ransomware cases. That's never happened, right? There's always one piece of those that's crossing an international border. And by virtue of that, and by virtue of the increased regulations and regulatory authority interest in ransomware, as well as legislation which also has been introduced in the United States to ban the payment of ransomware, having international partners that you can turn to for quick advice, competent subject matter experts in the field that you can bring in is crucial. So thank you, Arnie, and obviously thank you, Steve, who I've known for years and is terrific as well.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you, Arnie, for putting this group together and catalyzing it. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Stephen Wu. I'm a shareholder in Silicon Valley Law Group and obviously in the Silicon Valley chapter of INBLF. My practice is more on the proactive side. I help set up enterprise security programs and advise on the legal side of that, although do a lot of what is essentially information consulting work. But my practice has 5 pieces. One is transactional, where a lot of the agreements that I do, like software as a service agreements, have data security and data privacy attachments or exhibits that I help to negotiate. Second piece is on the compliance side, where I'm helping with compliance with California Consumer Privacy Act, GDPR, and data security requirements. I wrote a book called A Guide to HIPAA Security and the Law on Healthcare IT Security, and the second edition of that book. The third piece is I work on, I do some litigation, but not in the information security area so much as trade secret misappropriation, which is a form of security issue. But I also help with proactively looking at trying to mitigate the risk from information security liability. The fourth piece is incident response. So that means breaches, including ransomware. I'm working on one matter right now, a data breach. And then the fifth piece is governance of information technologies. So that means writing a lot of privacy policies, writing a lot of security policies and subordinate documentation. I've written or co-written 7 books on information security and the law. From 2001 to 2004, I was co-chair of the American Bar Association's Information Security Committee in the Science and Technology Law section. Later on became chair of the section. And I'm now on the American Bar Association Cybersecurity Legal Task Force, which has been around for a while to help the American Bar Association throughout the country come to grips with things like ransomware and other types of data security threats. And then more recently, I've been involved in artificial intelligence and robotics since 2007. I have started and now chair the American Bar Association-wide Artificial Intelligence and Robotics National Institute. And security and privacy have a lot to do with that. So that's my background. But I thought today we could try to brainstorm a little bit about what kind of matters are you seeing in your individual practices, and what kind of collaboration do you think might be helpful for you?
Steve, just one sec before we get into that. I see Dana is on the has joined, and I just wanted her to briefly introduce herself so that we've got a complete group here. Dana.
Oh, thank you so much. Sorry, I'm walking, so I can't do my picture, but I'm Dana Kottman. I'm an intellectual property attorney out in San Diego, and we handle the getting of patents and trademarks as well as the monitoring and enforcement.
Okay, thank you. So Steve, why don't you just reframe and let's just start having a conversation.
Yeah, I think I'd like to get some idea from people about how much work they're doing in the area of cybersecurity, and if you could divide it between proactive, setting up enterprise security programs for your clients versus reactive incident response versus litigation, like the stuff that Joe was talking about, or governmental investigations, versus setting up systems for secure electronic commerce, which is another piece. You know, when I was at VeriSign from 1997 to 2001, I was helping set up secure electronic commerce systems using digital certification services that make use of the public key infrastructure technology. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that, but digital signatures, digital certificates, that was my business from 1997 to 2001. But anyway, you know, maybe we could just go around and please jump in and talk about the amount of work you're doing and the kinds of work you're doing.
Could I suggest maybe if you give that list a little more slowly, people can raise their hand if this is an issue that they have in fact faced within their firm or with clients, and then we'll get a sense of the experience that people are having. Just maybe 2 or 3 of the top things that you want to sort of focus on. We'll raise hands, and then people can chime in with their expert. You know, what was their issues.
Yeah, and just to recap what I'm talking about, I think there are 4 pieces here that we could help each other out on. One is setting up enterprise security programs. So writing, you know, people are writing, or companies are writing privacy policies, data security policies, data protection initiatives, those kinds of proactive kinds of things. The second piece is litigation and governmental investigations. And I guess I'm bunching these in a different way. But the third piece is setting up secure electronic commerce programs. These would be networks in which people use security technologies and digital certificates to interact in a secure way.
And Joe, do you want to add anything? Obviously, any ransomware experience?
I think that largely covers it. Yeah, but yeah, any ransomware experience.
Okay.
I think maybe that's the place to start in. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Who has dealt with ransomware besides Joe and Steve and Martin? Okay. Anyone else? David. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I do feel, Arnie, I do feel like ransomware is only one piece of a very larger picture, as some of the other people have talked about. That ransomware is an important issue, but there are these other aspects of cybersecurity that I think we could help each other out on.
Okay, proactive in terms of who's been writing policies and support. Okay, so let me just get Martin, David, Carolyn, Mark. Okay, any government investigations or litigation in terms of dealing with those issues?
That's Joe as well.
Mark, Joe, David. Dan, have you seen any of this in your practice area yet?
Hey, Arnie,
Yeah.
I have a question for Steve and Joe. How do you guys think or crypto fits into this, and or does it? And part of my reasoning here is I've had to deal with the FBI and some others on crypto issues, which then tied in with some of these other issues, because obviously
Yeah.
crypto is how people are doing ransomware, but they're also doing other things with it. So is that an area that you think this group ought to be thinking about?
So
I do.
I'll answer from my perspective, yeah, and then turn it over to Steve. We spent a lot of time on the crypto issue. We could probably spend an hour Zoom call just on navigating the crypto issues. But the reality of it is virtually all the ransom is payable in crypto of one form or another. And it raises a number of challenging issues, both for insurance carriers, law firms, investigations companies, ransomware negotiators. It makes it really, really tricky. So yes, I think that should be a focus. And I'm assuming Steve agrees.
I agree. I'll maybe break Mark's mention of crypto into two pieces. One is cryptocurrencies and blockchain related technologies. The data breach that I'm working on right now is actually a crypto blockchain type of issue where someone's I'll call him a high net worth individual. He lost a lot of money when he was hacked, essentially, and there was a SIM swap attack. That's what they call a SIM swap attack. Somebody was able to compromise the phone account that he had to be able to use that as a authentication mechanism to gain access to his wallet, and he lost a lot of money. So that data breach has to do with crypto right now. But the other piece of crypto is cryptography. And so when I talked about secure electronic systems, the most robust system for secure electronic commerce is public key infrastructure, which is based on cryptographic technologies, both symmetric and asymmetric cryptography. And so that was my business from 1997 to 2001. So I think there's a lot of possibility there. People are using public key infrastructure, although they don't seem to hire lawyers relating to it that often. But I have done some PKI work over the years since I left VeriSign. I feel like it's going on in banks and financial service institutions, but they put technologists in charge of it, and they don't really have any legal oversight over it. And the lawyers who are in-house at banks don't know anything about it. So it ends up being unlawyered, essentially, which is a problem. But I think there's opportunity, to answer your question, Mark. I think there's opportunity in both types of crypto.
Maybe we can turn, in terms of the proactive aspect. We had a fair number. Martin, what you said, Martin and David, you both indicated experience there. What kind of issues have you been dealing with for your clients?
Well, there have been some ransomware attacks, and in those cases, we normally start working together with IT specialists, also depending on what the client already has in place. Sometimes the client has a good IT insurance, which already entitles them to a whole package of service providers that can be necessary in case of such a ransomware attack. And we've been advising on this strategy of negotiating and depending on backup strategies, etc., that the parties had in place, whether to give in or not. And as a more general note on security, in my practice, when we advise in M&A situations, we of course also advise on the security status within a company. And there's of course a big difference between the pure technical security and organizational security, which both is also an obligation under the GDPR. And I'm not a technician, so basically use IT experts when it comes to checking out the level of IT security. Of course, we can check whether certain standards are met, but the legal discussion which I encounter quite often is, well, for example, in processor agreements, when a data controller retains a processor and wants to impose a certain level of security, over the years, of course, the security requirements evolve, and basically the GDPR requires an adequate level of security, which is, of course, something you can debate over what's adequate. And then a very interesting question that pops up all the time is, what if the controller wants a higher level than an adequate level? Who's paying for this, and what is an adequate level? Those are very interesting discussions if there are no clear standards in the specific fields. And those are examples.
Have you engaged sort of cross-border firms to work with, or your clients? I mean, is it a multi?
In Europe, there are if there are multi-country, if there's multi-country processing going on, we have discussed such subjects with various companies. And another element in which we have discussions on this with US firms is, well, extra measures, cryptography to enable cross-border transfers under Schrems, and what the possibilities are for, well, creating extra measures to protect the data, to be able to argue that a certain transfer should be acceptable under EU data protection law.
Arnie, before we go on to others, you know, what Martin is saying kind of raises two areas of opportunity. One is transparency disclosures and transparency impact analyses out of in the wake of Schrems 2, because it seems like, as a matter of compliance, you're going to need that if you're doing cross-border transfers using the standard contractual clauses. So that's something that maybe we could collaborate on, because a lot of the problem is US national security laws that might end up allowing US government access to personal data that's coming over from Europe. The second piece that Martin mentioned that I think is particularly helpful is, I think in my experience, if you're talking about proactive, setting up enterprise security programs, there are a lot of companies that hire a chief information security officer, or have some, if it's a smaller company, they have somebody who's like a technology person in the company. They feel like they want to be secure. They set up security processes, but they never hire lawyers, because they just feel like this is a technical problem. It's not really a legal problem. But where the rubber hits the road, or where it gets to be a real problem, is when the company wants to sell itself in an M&A transaction. Then all of a sudden, there are going to be lawyers on the other side asking all kinds of probing questions about the security posture of this target company. And then they realize, oh, it's not just a technical issue, it's a legal issue. And so I think there's a forcing activity there with the sale of the company, where all of a sudden the target company realizes, I just can't hand it to the CISO or the technology person in my company to say, hey, you go take care of this. I actually have to have lawyers to look at this, to help me to explain to the acquiring company's lawyers why there's compliance and why there's security. So M&A transactions, I think, are a huge opportunity for us.
Part of what I'm thinking, and Steve, your comments and Martin's as well, sort of raise, you know, what other disciplines would be useful to have in this task force. I mean, I view this as an organizational get to know each other meeting. We're not going to accomplish, you know, a whole lot. We're sharing ideas, but I've thought of insurance firms that specialize, or departments in the larger firms. Internationally, we obviously have, you know, large large multi-discipline law firms domestically in the US and Canada, more specialized boutiques. We've got firms that do insurance. I put a finger on Mark because he's got the financial expertise and securities. M&A, I think adding insurance, M&A, obviously the tech aspects. I mean, there are people that are versed in it, you know, to more or less degrees. But Farshad, have you seen these issues, or has your firm seen these issues in India?
Well, actually, my firm just more recently started working on these kind of matters, but certainly, I mean, the data privacy kind of law legislation has been developing since 2016, but we don't have anything passed yet. So it's something that's rapidly evolving more recently. But you know, it's you know, something that we've just been getting into. So I can definitely keep the, you know, the group updated as things develop. But yeah.
And part of in the back of my mind, there's a notion that where countries such as India or elsewhere are developing legislative or regulatory responses to look at clients that are sort of actively involved, that are participating in that process, but then turning to others that may have in their own country, you know, a level of expertise that can sort of be part of a team, rather than simply focusing, you know, in one country to sort of create sort of using the INBLF, you know, knowledge and resources to sort of bring that to bear. So as an example, in India, if they are developing legislation, and I don't remember whether it was Martin or David sort of mentioned about, you know, banning ransomware payments in their country. Was that you, David? Did you mention that? Or
no, that I think that was Martin who mentioned that. But I think you have that. I mean, you already have that issue in the US with the sanctions, which is often actually not even noticed when I talk with insurance companies telling them that they have potentially an exposure in that regard. But I think when you ask about the security part of it, although I do have a technical background, I very often see that we from the legal part are interested in the security, but it's out of scope of a lot of what we are advising on. And on the other hand, I also see, and Schrems 2 was mentioned before, that a lot of people, at least on the legal side, they see somehow like the solution in the technology. And when I talk to the technology people, they tell me, we look for the solution of all our problems on the legal side. And I think there is a certain disconnect. I have shared with you a link, it was mentioned before, about these transfer impact assessments, a tool set that I've made open source about doing transfer impact assessments. The IAPP has adopted it. It's also available under their brand. And it is about calculating the risk of lawful access from, for example, the US government, or India is also in there, and Russia and some other countries. And the interesting thing there is that, again, on this whole Schrems 2 discussion, people believe that you can solve all these problems by encryption or by some technical measures actually preventing access, for example, by the government in such a situation, the US government. But that is in most cases actually technically not possible, because when you close down the systems that they are really protected, then you can't use them anymore. And so we are in an area which I find very interesting, and this is something that we give a lot of advice to clients, is to actually go and show where does foreign law, now from our Swiss or European perspective, US law, prohibit US authorities to access data because it is not under custody, possession, or control, but still technically accessible. So that there is a gap between full encryption and not encryption, but not having day-to-day control or legal control over it, so that the providers, for example, can argue we do not have to provide it, even though we could hack ourselves into our own system, and by that protecting it. So that kind of view, for example, which is now also in the transfer impact assessment, this model is in there. These type of distinctions are the ones where we see we can gain most out of it, because it goes then relatively really to the heart of the matter, because quite often otherwise we as lawyers believe that the security people can solve our problems and the other way around, and that doesn't work. So that's something where I see still a lot of know-how needed around here in Europe. And when you asked before about what do we see in terms of these ransomware cases, there actually the security is not really the issue we see. I mean, of course, the security can prevent ransomware attacks to happen, but once we see them, the main issues we see is first the whole data breach notification obligations. If you have a company that has all over the world, and I don't need to tell you, in the US, you have in every state a different type of data breach notification obligation, but we also have the same issue here in Europe. And then the second question is, what do you do as a company if you know that 1 terabyte of data has been stolen and it is leaked on the darknet? How do you find out what this data is about, and who do you then inform? And we have now a case of a client where I don't know how much terabyte or whatever is leaked out, and it is on a weekly basis automated. 10 gigabytes are shared every week. And the company is now, obviously it has certain obligations to find out, is there data in there about our customers? We need to tell them. They can't go to everybody because they don't know who all those customers are in that case. And so they have the very practical and also economical issue of actually cleaning up and dealing with these cases after they happened. And paying the ransom was not an issue there. And that's the other issue that we sometimes have, that we have clients where we have to advise them actually to pay, because that's the business decision. We may not like it. And Joe, you certainly as a former prosecutor, you would not advise people to do that potentially, but that's something we see where in some cases, actually paying was the better option. And especially in cases where you then also make it public that you have paid, because the ransomware, the artists, they anyhow know, but that you also have a certain pressure from a business model side, because if you pay and it doesn't work, then their model dies as well. So there are these kind of considerations where you can come off and start from a legal point of view, but where you have to very fast get very practical in advising companies to deal with it. And it then ends up to the question, and maybe some of you also have experiences, how do you negotiate with the hackers? Because that's then the other question. In most cases, you actually can get a bargain out of it.
Yeah, these are all great questions. And I guess, any one of them could be the subject of an extended discussion. And I have lots of experience on all those. And one of the things we do at my firm is we're outside counsel to a ransomware negotiations firm. So we've actually helped them develop guidelines on what they can and can't do in negotiations. I think all those points are great. Just taking a step back, I think, and I'd love to know kind of Steve's thoughts on this is, it seems to me that kind of ransomware is a great attention grabber, right? It's a great way to get a client's attention, like, hey, ransomware, it's front page news. The question though, right, I think is how to use that as a way of having the larger conversation, right, about some of the larger issues that Steve has put on the table, which are critically important, without it seeming, like disconnected from the ransomware, right? Because look, being in a good place to have your company acquired and get a good price for it because you have good data privacy and security controls, it obviously, part of that is making sure that the company's prepared for and can fend off a ransomware attack. But I just would want to be sure that as we go to market this, right, the attention grabber, whether it's, which is going to be, I believe ransomware, it's in the headline, right, has a linkage to those other things so that we don't have clients feel like, hey, I want to talk about ransomware and whether I can pay in Ethereum versus Bitcoin. And now you're talking to me about Shrems 2, right? Now, there's a reason to have the conversations about Shrems 2 when you've got that person's attention, but I just think we have to integrate the linkage so that the clients don't feel like we're just using ransomware as an excuse to get 15 minutes with them. I think it can be done, but I just think we need to be cognizant of that. But great ideas that everyone's put on the table.
Yeah.
Let me-
And like I said, I think ransomware is only a piece of it. And what I don't want to have happen is for potential clients to think, oh, you've got a ransomware response team, great. We'll ignore you for all the other, I think, larger revenue types of projects like the M&A transactions. So I agree with Joe. We got to figure out a way of bridging the news about ransomware with the rest of the enterprise considerations. And maybe that's as part of a marketing posturing, we say we're ransomware and then we talk about those other things in the same breath so that people don't have this idea that we're just focused on ransomware alone.
And I would underscore that. I know Martin indicated he's got to leave and shortly, and we probably should. It's a bit amorphous in terms of, you know, I know this is a fabulous group. I can see more people that I'd want to add, more disciplines. I think in part the question is, you know, besides from sharing our expertise, what will be our as a task? What's our business target? And I mean, to me, the business is to get business, to create business opportunities for the members in practice areas that we have both expertise, to create linkages among firms that can achieve multiple opportunities, you know, for members. Martin, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on what I'd suggest is it's about we've gone about an hour, maybe another 10 minutes or so, and then sort of look to plan. I'm going to have Annabelle coordinate with Steve and Joe in terms of trying to set this up.
Arnie, just as a matter of what can be the output of this meeting, I mean, one of the things that maybe we could do is start creating a shared document that is broken down by types of cybersecurity matters, and firms can have an entry in those, and then a geographical directory so that we have a guide handy in case we have a matter coming up. And this can be something shared with the entire INBLF down the road, but start putting that kind of directory together.
I think that's a great idea. I think also in terms of initial targeting, I would say we've got 250 firms in the network. They can be our initial target. Not every one of them deal with cyber issues, but let's let them know about the joint expertise on this Zoom and sort of others that we'll be adding, so that when issues arise, they know where to go. They know who to support. I mean, we often, do a quick call to somebody to get some initial advice, and then the expert that if it really gets deep, you can turn to. So, I mean, I think our initial target is just ourselves writ large, and then secondly, the question, and this becomes sort of like a business determination of this group, and maybe we can resolve at the next meeting. Would our targets be other law firms, not just in the network, target other law firms who are then the step to their client base, and create us as a resource, and perhaps law firms, and I know you've each advised law firms, on these matters. I don't know if others have, but the law firms can become clients as well, and then outreach, at a later point to to the actual businesses. But I think Steve's point about creating a shared document, and as I mentioned, Joe had sent an email, which to me was sort of like the almost an agenda, which we haven't completely got to, but he talked in identifying out, and we'll make sure everybody, you haven't seen this, has it. Things like locate your cyber incident response plan. How many have a cyber incident response plan? Just infrastructure disruption, critical infrastructure, and how do you prevent disruption? Backups, network surveillance, patch management, contractual, regulatory, insurance, internal, external communications, disinformation. I mean, there are things here that Joe has outlined that I think can form the basis for a shared document. If we take this email that Joe laid out, we can add some more additional concepts, and then when we get together next, have that as a working document, and then develop a business plan for this task force that would lead us to business. That's really at the heart of my goal.
Arnie, if I could add one other thing, maybe a second shared document. Joe mentioned this firm that he's representing that is doing ransomware negotiations. These are vendors, or you could call them business partners in a way. We could have a directory of business partners as well. I work a lot with forensic experts, and there are a lot of other types of vendors and business partners that we could put together a directory of, so that we could get referrals out to these business partners who then might give us referrals in.
Mark, do you agree?
So, yeah, and I would also say we need to have maybe a subset of the document on public policy issues. And here's where, I defer to all of your expertise. What are the items that are most pressing to change in policy? Is that Congress is kind of all over the place, very interested, but nothing seems to be terribly coalescing so far. That's one piece. And then the other piece you mentioned before, Arnie, is coordinating transnationally and seeing what's being done in India, for example, and elsewhere. What pieces of theirs that they're focusing on could we use over here? I mean, that's more a little bit down the road. How can we draw the international community a little closer together on policies? Because this is a very threatening international issue, not just ransomware, but all the whole constellation of cybersecurity issues. And they're coming from, just off the top of my head, Russia and lots of other places. So US laws or Indian laws or laws in Luxembourg, you pick it, are not going to be good enough in scope to address everything that needs to be addressed. And so, I would see what we need to focus on is, what do we need to support all of what everyone is doing? And what are the things under consideration that would be counterproductive? And we need to stay away from them or push back on them. But there should be a component in there that talks about all of that.
Arnie, also, especially for marketing purposes, but for other reasons as well, I think it might be helpful to have a computer scientist as part of the task force. I would think some of our IP members would probably have lawyers who have computer science degrees. And perhaps you could think about reaching out to some of the IP firms, because it's just a good button to push when you're putting together a marketing plan.
We write a lot of software patents and, deal with blockchain and all of that. Joe Mayo, some of you know in our office, is a software engineer. And so that's an issue. What we deal a lot with also is questions related to security for, clients with their NFTs and whatnot. And I'm not sure
really how to direct them. Is that a legal question or is that a, tech question?
It's often mixed.
So I might have a referral for you, Stephen.
Okay, thank you. We can have guests come on to these calls. My contact in a national cyber security and a forensic firm might be willing to give a talk to us, to talk about best practices relating to incident response.
And I've always thought in the back of my mind, sort of other ways of expanding sort of the resources of the network to have almost like affiliates in certain subject areas. The first one that comes to mind is accountants, but there may be other sort of categories of expertise, as sort of Mark and Steve, as you've sort of identified for this specific area. Insurance, in other words, there are lawyers that will deal with insurance, but to bring in sort of a company specializing that does cyber insurance, and that can become a potential, again, resource for business. I think before we start losing more people, let's sort of pick up on Steve's idea, create a shared document, and maybe I'll ask Steve and Joe to initiate the document. We can use a Google or other program that would be useful, for people to comment, add, and make additions to it, and then use that as a basis for discussion for our next meeting. Annabelle will coordinate with everybody on this call and others that we want to bring in to sort of identify the task force. I view this as, frankly, a long-term project. I don't think we're going to change the world in 48 hours or whatever, but clearly I think if we lay the groundwork here for a multidiscipline, multinational approach, we will be in a position to promote our practices and to promote the the real opportunities that the knowledge and expertise that we have can afford. So if anyone has anything else to add, I'll suggest that Steve and Joe will coordinate with Annabelle and me, and we'll then circulate access to a specific document that people can add their own additional thoughts about, and we can use that as the basis for our next meeting. That makes sense, Joe, Steve?
Yeah, sure. And Arnie, I'd just say, as far as people to invite to the next meeting, the business lawyers who are doing M&A transactions who don't know too much about cybersecurity within the network, I think would be the top group that I would identify.
Okay. Any other last comments? All right, well, I thank everybody. The meeting has been recorded. Annabelle will circulate ways in which if you need to review anything, and we'll also open it to others. I wanted to record principally for people that weren't here so that they can get a sense as to, what we'll be about. And I know that for the next meeting, we'll have many more little Zoom boxes, or hopefully Zoom boxes, not team boxes, in different directions. But I thank everybody for participating, and I particularly thank Farshad for. I know it's got to be late in India, so thanks for hanging in.
Thank you, Arnie. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, okay, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.